Firstly, we have Emmet Kelly. He is the CDO for Yap Holdings, and he has more than 35 years' experience working in finance, telecoms, FMCG, digital market research, and many more. Please give him a very warm welcome. Secondly, we have Amith Rajan, who is the EVP and Head of Data and Advanced Analytics for Mashreq Bank. During his 20-year career, he has also led transformational teams for entities including Standard Chartered's Global Bank in Singapore. He is a passionate keynote speaker and a mentor to fintech startups. Please welcome him also. And completing our distinguished lineup, I'm thrilled to say we're joined by Aamer Mushtaq. He leads the engineering sales team in the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa for Snowflake. He was one of its founding members down under in Australia and New Zealand, and he's served clients in the MENA region for more than 10 years now. Please welcome him also. And with that, Ravi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And thank you so much for this panel. I was reading about some data, and at present, companies analyze only 12% of the data that they gather, and less than 20% empower their teams to use that. So how can enterprises prepare themselves for the new data economy? And that's the discussion that we're going to have today with our extremely respected and talented panel. So I want to start with you, Emmet. You champion making data available to the teams and connecting data with teams. Why is it so critical? And more importantly, why do companies fail?
Well, thanks for an interesting question, and thanks to everybody for inviting me here, and to be sitting on this platform with such an esteemed panel is really great. A little bit about Yap. I mean, Yap is a fintech. It's a disruptor. We're disrupting banking, so we're behaving in a certain vertical. So what I'm going to say wouldn't necessarily apply to all the different sectors, but I think it'll be generally true. It's a very interesting question, but I'd like to flip it around and just talk about why companies fail, or why teams fail. That's where we should start, because I don't think anybody intends to fail. I think we fail for a variety of reasons, and companies that are 5 years old probably inevitably have data silos. So it's very difficult for them to connect that data to the right people at the right time. They bought software a while ago. It was probably expensive, and the software tried to lock the customers into using that software, and by definition, it created a data silo. So that's nobody's fault. It's nobody's blame. It's just something that happens. So at Yap, I try not to buy software. I try to buy platforms. Okay, a platform is a group of software that is connected from the get-go, and that makes my life so much easier, and that means I can scale. So if I have Google, for example, there's maybe 20 pieces of software there. We work with HubSpot. There's 50 pieces of software there, and they will help with marketing. They'll help with our operations, with our sales, and with our customer support, but they're already connected. So by definition, they're pulling data from different sources and bringing it together into a nice interface that I want the functions from different pieces of software, and then we put it in the same repository. So that works terribly well for me, and it's scalable. And that gives me the capacity to build a data stack for Yap, which I like to think in terms of not a group of pieces of software, but a single machine. We should build a machine for each company that we work with, not buy software. What is a single machine? Well, in Dubai, everybody loves cars, so it's a good analogy. If I buy a car, I know that the engine, if I want it to be a good car and not to break down, the engine will probably be Japanese, the design might be Italian, the engineering might be German, the chassis might be American, the tires also, but it's a single machine. And if you've got a strong machine, then you can customize around that. That's especially important to us at Yap, because we're 4 years since inception. We are live in the UAE for the last, I think, 6-8 months. Tens of thousands of customers. We're growing very well, but we're going to be in 4 more countries this year. So I need a single machine that I can put in each of these countries that would exist within the context of these countries. The rules are different. So we're going live in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia, in Ghana, all very different countries, very different contexts, very different geographies. So we can customize around that single machine rather than buying separate bits of software. Why is it critical? Because if you don't have a single machine, you don't have a strong data core. And data core means that you have the platforms, good data governance, and you know exactly what all the different pieces of data mean. If you don't have good data governance, you shouldn't be running AI. If you don't know what the data means and you run an AI algorithm across dodgy data, you're going to multiply any errors exponentially. This summit is called the Velocity Summit. Everything's moving very quickly, which means we need to adapt all the time. So a strong data core with good AI means we're set to move into the future. The future is about AI, it's about automation, it's about building individual machines which work not by themselves, but which are governed and which are driven by people, but they're terribly efficient. So basically that's the summary of my answer. To get the right messages to the right people and to optimize the right machine, to get the best business results for your company, you need a good data core, and then you'll be able to run AI against that data.
Amith, what are your thoughts on this? And I want to use that analogy of buying a car, which we'll come to later, because when I'm buying a car, I get standard features, whereas a company would want to customize the car and the platform as per their unique requirements. So we'll come to that. Amith, what are your thoughts on this, and how have you approached making sure data is analyzed and it's available for the teams?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And so at Mashreq, I think we've been fortunate that we've had a lot of senior management support. And I think that's important. So in some ways, today, it's good for us that you don't really need to market the need for data analytics. I think it's now become existential for most organizations. But on the flip side, it is also equally challenging to really measure the ROI on any data analytics project, right? So when you're starting with a program, it sometimes is a leap of faith, or sometimes it could be that we are sort of keeping up with the Joneses, and so everybody's doing it, so we also need to do it. But I think whichever way it is, one of the first things that we need to do is make sure that, to your point, to Emmet's point, that data governance. So one of the first things we need to do is make sure that we understand what data we have and we govern it. But at the same time, we don't, in today's speed, we don't stop until we are sure that we have governed our data properly. So because that's a nirvana state. I don't think anybody ever reaches that state. So hand in hand with the governance, you also have to start looking at ROI. You need to start monetizing the data. So one of the first challenges you'll face is your data proliferation, or the fact that for any reasonable sized organization, you're going to have silos. You're going to have redundant data sitting in multiple places. You're going to have different schemas sitting across different locations, different businesses. And how do you address all of that, right? So I think one of the first things you need to do is start addressing that with a proper program that looks at building a data dictionary, cataloging your data across the board, looking at how you can then put up your quality metrics on that data, and then you sort of govern that data. So while hand in hand you're going with that, my advice would be to pick a specific use case. Don't try and boil the ocean. Pick a specific business, pick a specific use case, and prove that it works over there, for which you can then carve out a set of data, and you can work on a specific use case with a committed stakeholder. You need to have that kind of senior management support. You take that, you prove that it works, and it will work. If you do it correctly with the right data science sitting behind it, it should give you a good result. Or it might not, and then you move to the next use case. But then you build a runway of 3 or 4 use cases. You take 6 months to a year, and you prove that it works, and then everybody is willing to go after it.
Aamer, what about you? Where you come in here?
So I'll share with you a recent research that Snowflake did in November, December. We did a survey of 1,000 executives, which were a mix of business and IT. Mm-hmm. They represented different types of industries, whether that was healthcare, financial sector, government, retail, manufacturing. to understand what does the data leaders in this new data economy are doing right. And one of the three things that we discovered was, we all know that technology on its own is not the answer, right? So it needs to be combined with the people and the processes. And when it comes to people, having executive level leadership from the top, so they consistently and vocally talk about the importance of data and bringing a cultural change within the organization is something paramount, right? You can have a really brilliant strategy, but it will not deliver the right results if you don't have the buy-in from the top. Also, having a data leadership role, like either a CDO or something equivalent of that, which owns the strategy and the execution within the organization is absolutely critical. You would be surprised, and according to the survey, 48% of the organizations reported that they don't have a CDO role well defined inside their organization, which to me is one of the first foundations that you must have within the organization as well. And thirdly, enablement and training of employees across the board, not just the specialist roles, but everybody within the organization, in order to bring a cultural change, should be educated on the data and have a program around data literacy as well. One of the things that I noticed from the survey was having a community internally. So employees can share best practices and advise each other and share their experiences. We learn from each other. So having a community like that definitely helps bring that cultural change into the organization as well.
Those are great insights. And just to flip the format a bit, I'm not going to wait till the end of the session to take audience questions. So after every round, I would invite you to ask questions. So one point that Emmet made about he not buying software, rather buying platforms, right? Does anyone have any question, comment on that? Yep. Can we have a mic sent there, please? If you could just introduce yourself and then ask the question.
Yes, Aamer from NBC Group. So obviously, I fully agree with this concept, but I think you have the luxury of being a startup, right? So you basically can build everything up from scratch. However, I mean, in my previous job back in Zurich Insurance, I mean, we had a huge legacy of us. So, and it was always one of the most difficult parts, I mean, to get software kind of, sunset software and all. So I guess it's quite a challenge to follow your advice, which I would support. But I think if you have all the legacy, it gets very difficult.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and we are a startup. Everybody in the company has the founders have 20 years plus experience, and we're all terribly experienced people who've worked in big corporates and started companies and sold companies. So we can take that helicopter view and we can start with our intention going forward. But I think it is a change that's only happened in the last few years. You're absolutely right. I've worked in huge organizations with loads of legacy software and management silos and budgetary silos and sign-off silos and so many silos. I mean, the human silos, the processes that you're referring to, they become silos also. Because the more you spend on a piece of software, you actually need a team of people to run it, and that becomes a silo which validates the spend and all of that sort of stuff. So you're absolutely right. This is a luxurious situation, but things have changed. 5 years ago, you were only sold software, and the software was big and it was expensive and it needed teams and if you needed more modules, you needed change, very expensive. And then something happened. Then we started talking about ecosystems. We started talking about the terms as a service. Everything was as a service, even platforms as a service. So this is a shift in the way things are being sold. We use HubSpot. That's an interesting word. It's a hub and it's a central spot. It's a central node which connects lots of different pieces of software. So I think there's a change in the maturation of the way software is being packaged and being sold and being brought together to work together in the same way that, parts of a car work together. As I said, a Japanese engine, the clutch will be German, but it's the one car. So I think we need the concept of a single machine We're building a single machine. We're not buying software. We're not buying those things. It's really difficult if you are from an older, more mature organization, because you will probably be going through a digital transformation, or several of them, and you'll have consultants going around, and that's very expensive. Nothing I can do about that. But I think from a North Star perspective, the concept of buying platforms and working with platforms makes things much easier to deal with. But I think your observation is a good one, definitely.
Can I just add to that? So, I mean, I've worked in legacy organizations and large organizations. There is no magic bullet, yeah? So at the end of the day, this is a slog. So the most important thing is there has to be a plan to move out of these softwares and to the new age tech, right? The microservices, the platform-based architecture. And one of the most important things that we need to do, and digital transformations, you hear a lot about digital transformations and you read a lot about it, and most of them say after 2-3 years, oh, I don't know if we've really achieved what we've set out to achieve. So one of the most important things is don't make this a technology problem. It is not a technology problem. It is a business problem. The fact that we have legacy architecture, legacy infrastructure is preventing the business from scaling up, is preventing the business from taking advantage of the latest opportunities and products and markets and customers out there. We are not able to give the kind of customer experience that the customers are expecting today. So it's not a technology problem, it's a business problem. The moment you frame it as a business problem, and then you talk about what is a problem with your today architecture, what you're not able to do, and how if you move to the new one, you're able to do something else, that itself makes the case. So I think that's where you need to start from. Don't make it a technology problem, because it's always an organization problem, it's a business problem. Eventually it directly hits your bottom line.
Anyone else?
Just on that,
Yep.
I'll just share. Armin raises a very good point. The interoperability was one of the hardest problems to solve. Was something that was identified in that research paper that Snowflake did, and because of the survey, which consisted of industries like FSI, like retail, who have a lot of legacy. But the point being is the data strategy needs to be data forward-looking, right? You need to have a push towards the public cloud, which by far the majority of the respondents were starting to leverage. Yes, data interoperability is going to be a sticky point, but it's something that will need to be worked on over a period of time. As long as the initiatives are led by the business, and there is a business use case, and the stakeholders are from there, and you can identify the value, which will pull the data through to the cloud. And that was one of the key takeaways from the research.
That's interesting. Can we have the mic here, please?
Yeah, sorry, I have a question here. Here.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Batar Janjata, Emdad LLC. So my question is, you're talking about, the parts being from Japan or from the United States or from Korea or whatever, yeah? But when you single source, you get more compatibility, better compatibility between the parts than if you go, with multiple sources. What would be your answer to that? Like, for example, if I go with, let's say, X company, that do provide, BI tool, data tool, and at the end, they provide the database itself. Wouldn't that be better for me than going with multiple tools, and then deciding which tool is best for me? In other words, also they would have experience in my field, and they would do, have ready-made, let's say, BI or data analytics.
I think that's definitely true for some sectors. I mean, if you can find the perfect vendor that has all the tools that are specific to your sector and has the reporting and the integrations, and it's, the concept of bank in a box or, telco in a box. I mean, we've seen lots of these things. I have a little bit of claustrophobia when I work with companies where I'm putting all my eggs in a single basket, and that's just it's an emotional thing. It's not a rational thing. I feel, oh my God, this better work. I'm dependent on these people, and there's going to be lots of other bits that I can buy later. It'll be very expensive. So I like the freedom to be able to flex to different pieces of software. So that's why I'm talking about an integrated platform. So working with Google, working with HubSpot, we use Tableau for visualization. Tableau connects with anything. And that means we can visualize anything right across the stack from marketing, finance, customer support, sales, operations, fraud. I can visualize everything with a unified visual language. That gives me flexibility. From an AI perspective, we're working with a data robot. Again, it connects with everything, and it's low to no code. And this is gone? Oh, yeah, it's fine. It's low to no code, and that means that I can staff it easily, and I can run it easily, and then it has APIs, so I connect with stuff, and I can automate. So I like the freedom to flex. And from my perspective, because we're moving into 8 countries in 2 years, 4 countries this year, I need that flexibility. So we have a concept in YAP, which is a global heart with a local beat. So we provide the heart of the business. We provide the basic data stack and the branding and the operations. But it will be different in each country. So we do need that flexibility. So in Ghana, for example, where we're going, they don't have huge internet penetration. They don't use a lot of smartphones. It's going to be very different to the UAE, very different to KSA. From a data residency and compliance perspective, all of the countries are going to be different. So I need that flexibility. So if I'm in Pakistan, the data has to stay in Pakistan, on soil, if it's on cloud, hybrid cloud, local cloud, whatever. Same in Saudi Arabia. Same in UAE, not so much in Ghana. And then if we look at fraud and all of those transactional stuff, it's going to be different in all the countries. So I take the point about a single supplier. If I had a single supplier that could do all of those things in one country for one business, I think it would work well. Otherwise, I think I need the flexibility.
All right, I want to move on now. Amit, the next question is to you. How is your industry building a digital code of ethics into the business model, and why is it so important? We all know it's important, but tell us a little bit more.
Sure. So I think in the first part of our discussion, we didn't touch on a very important point, in which is regulations, right? So I'm in the banking sector. Banking is heavily regulated, and the regulators all over the world are starting to wake up to the importance of regulating data. UAE just came out with the CPR regulations late last year, and there is more coming down the pipe. So I think one of the things which I always find is it's better that we self-regulate rather than having to be told that you need to regulate. So I think from the banking point of view, there's definitely an awareness that it is better to self-regulate and be careful. Having seen all the issues that you can find with data privacy, etc., in other parts of the world, and the other regulations like GDPR, etc. So one of the things in terms of digital ethics or data ethics is your privacy. I think the 3 things that I really look for is what is the purpose, what is the integrity and transparency. The 3 sort of tenets that I look at. So why are you doing anything that you're doing with the data, right? What is the purpose of this? And do we need to get consent? Do we not need to get consent? Is this kosher, so to speak? Then, in terms of integrity, in terms of following the regulations, in terms of making sure that, we are not invading people's privacy, we are not crossing the regulations in different countries. So there's the local data regulations that you need to follow. And those can get challenging, right? If we are in about 15 or 16 countries and we are rapidly growing, and that has its own challenges in each place. And the third thing is the transparency. So whether it is within the models, whether it is within the data, and whether it is communications with the customer, we try and ensure that we have full transparency. So if the regulator comes to us tomorrow and says you need to explain, so model explainability is an important feature for me when I walk in and I'm talking to my data scientist, right? I do not want black box models yet. And very often we find, we talk about the best AI models out there. I don't think in banking you really need such complicated models yet. Yeah, I think most people forget that 80% of any data science project is actually data wrangling. So it's the data massaging and data wrangling that takes up the most amount of time on any normal data science project. So the industry is like, for each data scientist, you need at least 2 data engineers at the minimum. So for us, model explainability is a big deal. We make sure that we are able to explain why we are recommending what we are recommending, whether it's in the credit space, whether it's in the revenue accretion space, whether it's in the risk management space. We make sure fraud, etc. We make sure that we're very clear about that. Also, when we are looking at the other challenge you have is that most customers today will say one thing and do another. So if I ask any of you, are you willing to be tracked 24/7 wherever you go? And are you willing to share what your, which location you are in at all points in time? You will say, no, I wouldn't do that. But that's what your phone does. If you open up Google, that's exactly what's happening today. They can even say if you're standing or sitting, right? They can pinpoint it to that level. If you're standing in one place for a certain amount of time, if you're sitting, if you've got parking notifications on, your phone will often tell you that, do you want to go into parking mode, and we'll identify where the car is, right? So the customer says one thing, but increasingly we are finding that they're not doing the same thing, right?
Right.
So that's a challenge we got to follow. So we need to make sure that, we are transparent to the customers, because at the end of the day, if we're very aware, if the organizations don't respect data ethics or AI ethics, then we will end up getting, we will end up either losing the trust of the customer or the trust of the regulator. And both will be fatal for any organization.
Very true, very true. We have 5 more minutes, so I want to come to you, Aamer, and with a very broad question. How can organizations today win in the data economy? What are the kind of big steps that companies should be looking at?
Yeah, some of the points that Emmet and Amith have mentioned around the platform being extensible and interoperability are absolutely the tenets and the attributes that we look for from a technology perspective. I would also touch on collaboration being a big piece of the puzzle. Yeah, being able to collaborate internally and externally in a seamless manner, in a secure manner, and going back to the regulatory point, not being able to, having to move data around, having the data stored in one single place, but still be able to share it using concepts like, data clean rooms, is really unlocking a lot of the value from the data perspective that can be realized by the businesses. I would touch on the third pillar. So I spoke about the people, the processes, the governance, having a central data catalog, which allows you to catalog the data, but also having a common terminology internally within the organization. So when employees are talking to each other, they understand what the terms mean. Having a common glossary is again part of the data literacy within the organization. Creating alignment. So one thing that the research discovered was a lot of the data leaders in the space have a hub and spoke model, where they have a central COE for data, where each of the, I would say, line of businesses have a representative which is part of the COE, but they also disseminate that knowledge back into their own departments as well. So it works as a community of practice within the organization as well. And that leads to better collaboration and openness across the board. So those are, I would say, some of the nuggets that were realized from the research. Again, it is publicly available, so if one of you would like to have access to that research paper, you're welcome to come to our stand and we'll share that with you as well.
That's amazing. We have 3 more minutes for questions. So please, can we have a mic here, please? Here.
My name is Salahuddin Al-Muhammadi from HSA Group as Group IT Manager. All of us know that data analytics has changed the business landscape by providing right data at right time for right people to make right decision and to take right actions. I think the start point here is how to build strong or good data strategy. And my question here, what are the key factors that we should take in consideration for building such strategy? Thanks.
Who wants to take that?
I can go with that. So, I think so. Which business are you in? Like, what is the main?
We have diversified business lines: FMCG, banking, services.
So, first thing you need to do is, you need to understand if you want to build an integrated strategy across all your divisions, because these are quite disparate divisions, they're regulated differently. But if you go with an integrated strategy, then again, every time when I start something, my first question is, why do I want to do it? And why, start with the why. and what is the business objective that needs to be achieved. Because if you're not clear about that, and third thing, how do you measure that objective? So if you're not clear about, I've seen a lot of programs, and I've been guilty to a few of them, where you sort of jump in and then try and figure out, all these things. So it's always better to start with, why do we want to do this? What is the business objective? And how do I measure those objectives? If these things are clear, then you will get support from top to down. Once, and believe me, that support is important because, like I mentioned earlier, there is no easy solution for this. It's a slog. The older the organization is, the larger it is, the more different businesses that are within it, the more challenges you'll face in terms of making sense of your data. Because the data has been organically growing over a period of time, potentially growing in multiple businesses in different ways, different schemas, different tools. So if you need to make sense of this, and in your case, one of the best things would be the fact that if you've got these different business lines, how do I cross-reference, how do I cross-pollinate? Because there's a huge amount of advantage that you can find between banking and manufacturing or FMCG. There are inherent advantages over there by having these different businesses, but you can't realize that unless you're able to cross-pollinate or cross-reference it.
I'd also add to that, in your strategy, if you have several different sectors and verticals, it'll have to be flexible and able to adapt to change. Darwin wrote a book, Survival of the Fittest. I don't like the name of it. I think it should be called How Nature Adapts to a Changing Environment. Because that's really what we're doing. The world changes. You can have a black swan, you'll have COVID, you'll have political issues and wars and all sorts of stuff. If you're dealing with different verticals, your data stack is going to have to be adaptable and flexible. If you're too rigid, you're setting yourself up for a situation where you can't adapt to that change.
Those are great points. And with that, I think we'll close this session. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for this amazing insight. Thank you so much for the insightful questions. All right? That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.